Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes Reacts. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I am Office Bloke Daz.
Collectively we are two of the Office Blokes. Where's Mike gone?
Bad news for Mike.
Oh no.
He's got the big C.
Cock?
Well, he is, yeah.
No one's calling you a cock.
Oh. But he's suffering from COVID.
Typical Mike, isn't it?
Yep.
Over a year and a half into a pandemic and then he goes and gets it.
Everyone's had it now in the UK.
I got it out of the way ages ago. Yeah, Mike is all right. Don't worry. He's just tested positive for COVID, but I think he is asymptomatic and he's fine. He's just got to stay at home now for 10 days.
Yeah, just imagine his house though. He's probably got a clipboard out. His kids are probably having to sign in and out.
Have his
jacket on. He's probably got like rooms taped off.
Yeah.
He's probably done a risk assessment of what rooms he can and can't go in.
Yeah. It's fine.
Living with my risk assessment under COVID conditions, isn't he?
Do anything for a bit of time.
He's probably got one of them backpacks on that's spraying some kind of mist all over everywhere.
Yeah.
Full hazmat suit on.
Fair enough. Hashtag pray for Mike. Let's get it trending. Come on, Mike. You can do this. Right. 2 other YouTube channels, Patreon page, social media merch, all that good stuff. You know what to do by now. Click the link below. We appreciate the support massively. Right. China's geography problem. No idea. Is this going to be who they border with?
I really like Wendover Productions.
Yeah. It's going to be political borders, isn't it? Is this the one where they touched on in maritime law, where there was all the other countries where it crossed over? It could be things like that.
Could be. Let's see.
Let's get into it. So China's geography problem. Let's do this.
By Squarespace. Build your custom website for 10% off by going to squarespace.com/Wendover. China is a country both blessed and cursed by geography. On one hand, its land has allowed for the country to grow to almost 1.4 billion people, but on the other hand, it really doesn't have great geographical protection. The beginning of what most people call Chinese history often starts with the Yellow River civilization, and there's a good reason why this settlement grew into the most populous country in the world. The floodplain of the Yellow River is some of the best agricultural land in the world. In fact, the entirety of eastern China is perfectly suited for agriculture. This was and still is crucial to the country's success. What's more, this area is just warm and wet enough that farmers can do what is known as double cropping. Once the main crop of rice is cultivated in June and July, another slightly less productive crop can be planted for October cultivation. This increases rice output by about 25%, which means China can make more food using the same amount of land. Europe mostly relies on wheat to feed its population, which only outputs 4 million calories of food per acre of farmland. Rice, on the other hand, grows 11 million calories worth per acre. It's easy to see why there are so many people in China. But China does have its geographical challenges. To the south, it borders 3 countries: Vietnam, Laos, and Myanmar. The borders between these 3 countries and China seem almost arbitrarily set, because they sort of were. Vietnam's was set after the Sino-French War, Laos's was set following its involvement in the Vietnam War, and Myanmar's was set following a small war with China in the 60s. None was naturally set by the environment. All were chosen arbitrarily by humans at war. These countries are not insignificant. Combined, they have nearly 1 million active military personnel, while China, the much larger country, has just over 2 million. Significant conflict with any of these countries would not be a one-sided war. While China would have the technological advantage, any of these 3 countries would have a significant home field advantage. Vietnam, Laos, and Myanmar are all jungle countries, one of the most difficult environments for warfare. This was part of the reason why the Vietnam War lasted so long. It's just so hard to move troops in the jungle, so everything slows down. Without any geographical protection of its borders, it would be significantly easier for Vietnam, Laos, or Myanmar to invade China than the reverse. But China does have an advantage elsewhere. China and India just aren't good friends. They have border disputes, military conflicts, political differences, so it's just hard for them to get along, and that's why Tibet is so important. Tibet was historically its own empire. It was only in the last 300 years that China took it over. Tibetan people are ethnically different than the Han Chinese inhabiting China's east. It just doesn't make sense for Tibet to be part of China. except militarily. Only 0.2% of China's population lives in Tibet, which accounts for nearly 13% of the country's area.
Wow.
More people live in the inner 4 districts of Beijing than the entirety of Tibet. It's just incredibly desolate, but it serves a purpose. If China didn't rule Tibet, then India would. Maybe not formally, but there's little chance that an independent Tibet would not be economically and culturally dominated by either India or China.
What's the bit in the middle?
Nepal, is it? I think it's Nepal.
Ah. Do you remember when the Free Tibet thing was going around a few years ago? It seemed to be everywhere, and then it kind of died off, didn't it? I think, what was the one that... Was it what was the wrestler turned actor in America? Was it John Cena? Who he accidentally referred to, I think it was Tibet as a country, and then had to submit an apology and apologized in Cantonese.
Really?
Yeah, because his latest movie was going to come out in China, and that's where it was going to get most of its box office revenue.
Right. Yeah, politically and diplomatically nowadays, with all countries around there, you have to be very...
It's
anyway,
crazy,
you have to
isn't
be very... Everything what you have to say nowadays, you have to be careful.
True, yeah. I suppose it's like that in the West to a degree as well, isn't it?
It just doesn't have enough power economically or militarily to resist. But in China's view, it could not and cannot allow for an Indian Tibet. Indian rule of Tibet would mean that there would be no geographical protection between the populated area of China and India, because Tibet is that geographical protection. Not only does Tibet extend China's border to the Himalayas, it's also an unpopulated area without the transportation infrastructure needed for an invading India to advance a large number of troops towards eastern China. But that also means that there's not the transportation infrastructure necessary for China to advance towards India, but China is trying to change that. They recently opened the world's highest railroad to Tibet, they're building highways constantly, and they also opened a large airport in Yingqi, just miles away from the border. In the near term, the goal of these projects is to further integrate Tibet into China. The government has all but failed at winning over the native Tibetan population, but they can change who lives in Tibet. Hundreds of thousands of Han Chinese have moved into Tibet, and many more visit each year. The government knows that Tibet's usefulness is diminished if when a foreign military shows up, the population thinks that means liberation rather than invasion. But there's another reason China needs Tibet: water. The whole eastern zone of agricultural productivity exists because of all the water from Tibet. The Yellow and Yangtze rivers, China's 2 longest rivers, both get their water from Tibet, and foreign control of the water supply of the country would, in the government's mind, strike a catastrophic blow to the country's food security. If there were hypothetically a significant mountain range separating Tibet from eastern China, there's a good chance it would still be independent. The water would still come from China, and the mountains would act as the geographical protection that China desires. But to the north is another one of China's assets: Mongolia. It's an enormous, sparsely populated, friendly country. With the Gobi Desert and other desolate terrain, there's just little chance that any modern land-based army could make it across with any efficiency. The supply lines would be enormously long, and by the time they got to the Chinese border, there would have been ample warning. But then again, who would want to invade? Mongolia's only other neighbor is Russia, which is a friendly ally of China both militarily and economically. China need not worry about its northern border until relations with Russia sour. But that leaves the eastern border. Now you would think that this would be China's safest border, the ocean. But you have to consider that powerful states lay just off China's shores, the most powerful one being the US. The United States has a significant Pacific military presence with bases in South Korea, Japan, and Guam. It's also a close ally with Taiwan, Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia, meaning that if a serious dispute with China occurred, the US would have no problem blockading China and cutting off its maritime access. And of course, China knows this. That's why China has spent so much time, energy, and political capital to establish sovereignty in the South China Sea by building military bases and artificial islands. It knows that it needs these islands so it has sovereignty over the area so it can reach the Pacific in case of war. But ironically, its actions in the area are souring its relations with the very nations that China needs on its side. The Philippines, for example, doesn't have a bulletproof relationship with the US. While the two countries are allies, Philippine leadership has attempted to distance themselves from the US. If China hadn't ruined its relationship with the Philippines over the South China Sea dispute, it could have won them to their side, which would allow China crucial access to the Pacific if the US attempted a naval blockade. China's entire economy relies on exports, so restrictions to access to the oceans would lead to economic ruin. With its enormous...
It kind of would for everyone though, wouldn't it? If you stop exporting products, it's not just China that make a living out of these products.
No, because they're massive manufacturers, aren't they?
Yeah, but it's also
Global manufacturers.
It's the distributors who take them in their own countries and then distribute it. This whole economy is based on
That's what it's supply chain, isn't it? That's where it starts.
So blockade in China would be a disaster for everyone.
For a while, until other manufacturing countries started manufacturing.
Yeah.
But they've got the railroad now as well. That's why they're building that railroad, it was saying. So exports, I mean, you're not going to get as many containers from on the rail that you are going to get on an ocean, on a vessel.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different, but they still have, when they build that railroad, it'll run all the way through into Europe. Yeah. Pretty much.
I watched a thing a few years ago. It might have been a Vice documentary with I think it was the Japanese Navy. And Japan aren't supposed to have an offensive army or fighting force. It's only supposed to be defensive since the Second World War.
Oh, isn't that judo?
Dreadful. And basically they were saying that because of the tensions between Japan and China, Japan are essentially amassing an offensive fighting force now for the first time since the Second World War, but doing it on the quiet because the tensions are that bad between the two countries over
doing
a lot of things.
That quiet, you know.
Yeah, well, it's all me. I've got sources.
HP.
Population, China also relies on the importation of food, most of which comes on ships. Without jobs or food, there's a good chance that the population would rise up against the government and end the current regime. China didn't want to be a global power spreading its influence to every continent until recently. It wanted to be the dominant power in its region, Asia, but historically it kept its affairs within the region. It never colonized outside of Asia, and for much of history it didn't have a significant navy to project its power around the world. But that has changed because China got so big. China is now of a size where it cannot support its population with its size alone. Self-sufficiency in food production was a major aspect of China's domestic policy for decades, but the country has found a way to move past it as its economy has grown. Africa has emerged almost as China's China. It supplies the country that supplies the world. China has pumped enormous amounts of money into the continent in what some describe as a form of neo-colonialism. Chinese state-backed corporations have bought huge amounts of land in Africa to mine minerals, drill for oil, and grow food. China now imports more food and oil than it exports. While that is a sign of the development of its economy, it also means that it is now reliant on foreign powers, which is a vulnerable position for a country that is often at odds with some of those foreign powers. China doesn't have bad geography. It has some of the best in the world, which has allowed for it to grow into the largest country in the world. But as it grows into a more and more powerful and developed country, it needs to be cognizant of its vulnerabilities if the current regime wishes to continue. It's clear that because of its geography, the country is in a more precarious position than some may think. If there were ever a reason to go to war with China, the country is surrounded to the south and east by countries that would likely side with NATO powers. To the west and north, China is surrounded by countries and regions without the infrastructure to support China in a war. China is a nuclear power, which means formal war with other superpowers is unlikely. But if it ever were to happen, it's hard to deny that its major disadvantage is its geography. I just went through the process of building the new
That was really, really interesting, that.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that channel.
It's very well researched.
There was another video on there, which was, when I got this one, I was looking at some video, a little bit long for us to do, but as soon as I go on later, I'm watching it.
Yeah. Which one was that?
Oil in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabian oil.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, it's crazy because you sort of see China as this untouchable superpower that is on the verge of taking over the world. And then you look at that and it's like, it's actually on a knife edge. I know they've got Russia bolstering him, which a Russia-China coalition in a war, it'd be horrific for everyone involved.
Yeah, but China are they're very good at playing a game.
I think you're right about that. They buy up infrastructure.
I was in Africa when he's talking there, and I went to buy I needed a pump truck for the warehouse in Africa, one of the countries there. And when I went to get one, someone said, "There's a place," and he said, "I'll drive you out there." So we drove out there, and it was like in the middle of nowhere in Zambia. And we went in. All the workers were Chinese, and I bought the pump truck. And when I was waiting for it to come out from the delivery dock, guy turns up in a van, Chinese guy, opens the back, all Chinese food, like proper traditional Chinese food.
Yeah.
And he's just taking it all out, and they all come out from the like the back of the warehouse and the working sort of like stations where they were all Chinese. But it must have been about 50 or 60 of them.
Wow.
In Zambia.
As far as a regime goes, they are very much playing a long game, aren't they? To become the global superpower.
Big time.
It's
Their investment in this country is huge.
Well, no, you look at Huawei making the whole 5G infrastructure. That was a big deal for a while.
I'm talking about the investment in property, in land, in in real estate, all that kind of stuff. It's huge.
Stuff like that is so sensitive, though, because in the sort of situation where you do end up at a war or there's economic sanctions and stuff, you can essentially just asset strip.
Yep.
And you can say, "Oh, all those buildings you own." No, you don't.
You can do potentially, but
it's happened before historically.
If it's state-owned, yeah. Depends who owns them.
I'm pretty sure assets have been seized off Russian oligarchs and stuff that live over here that essentially, on paper, are self-made, but it's not state, is it, necessarily?
No, well, Abramovich got his citizenship revoked.
Did he?
Or his visa revoked, yeah.
I didn't know that.
He doesn't come watch Chelsea and stuff like that. He doesn't come to the ground anymore. I think he's got an Israeli passport now.
Wow. Wow.
Well,
proper interesting.
Yeah, it was very good, that. Really like that channel.
If the history of the entire world is anything to go by, that video we reacted to, and you watch how often states just mould and change and then become something else, and this stuff doesn't last forever.
No.
And you look at China there, Mongolia and Tibet may be proper China soon, and then it expands and then contracts on a different border. It's really interesting.
It's a brilliant channel, that.
Yeah.
Really do like it. Hope you guys like that too. Don't forget, like and subscribe, hit the bell, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Cheers. Guys.